Everybody, my name is Tyler Warden. I look after product here at Sonatype, and I'm here with our co-founder and CTO, Brian Fox. And we wanted just to get together here to share all that we know and what we've learned and some advice about the recent React2Shell 0 day. So maybe let's start off with what we know. Brian, why don't you get those that aren't maybe as deep into it up to speed on kind of the events and last week and what we know today.
Yeah, so this one's kind of interesting. It echoes back to the log4shell issue that was in log4j years ago, because this one, unlike a lot of the things we've been talking about lately, which are intentional malware types of things, this one is sort of your old air quotes boring vulnerability, but boring can sometimes be exciting when it's in a very popular component and leads to the ability to remotely upload and execute code unauthenticated. So this one scored a perfect 10.0, which you don't see very often. Even I don't think log4shell was a 10.0. So React, if you're not familiar, React is a very popular JavaScript UI framework. It can be used multiple different ways. This vulnerability does not apply to all possible uses of React, but it does apply to the parts where, if you're using the server-side communication components, apparently, which is also pretty popular. There's a bug in there that allows somebody to basically upload and that code gets executed without even authentication checks. So it's a little bit of unsafe deserialization and execution kind of all rolled into one. There was a related framework called Next.js, which bundles in React and can expose the same vulnerability. So there was a little bit of confusion in the beginning. There were two different CVEs that were assigned, but ultimately they kind of merged them together to give them one name, because it really was the same root cause underneath the hood. And then one is now marked as a duplicate of the other. But that's basically what we're talking about here. Where I think it got everybody to sit up and pay attention was, like I said, React is a very popular thing, just like log4j is a very popular thing. When you see something that has a blast radius like that, you pay attention. When you see that, oh, this is a 10.0 and it's a code execution on its face, that's a bit scary. So that's kind of what happened last week. That's where we are at the moment.
Yeah, and I think by their nature, React and Next are publicly exposed. Like, they're not back-end services, right? They're where a lot of people and data and APIs interact with, right? So because they're so front and center, they're out there to be attacked and looked at, which I think is really critical. So what you mentioned, that these are pretty popular, they're out there a lot. If an organization is not sure what to do, what do you recommend they should start doing right now if they haven't done anything up to this point?
Well, I mean, it's 2025. I really hope you have a bill of materials of some sort for what vulnerability, what dependencies you're using. This is something we've been preaching forever, but I know some organizations don't have that, right? So if you're scrambling around, even unsure if you're using the affected vulnerabilities, I mean, man, we got to help you figure this out. This is a very solved problem for decades, but we see this pattern time and time again. So you need to update your React versions. The affected ones for React are 19.0, 19.1, and 19.2. So they're relatively recent versions, I believe, of React. And you need to update to the patched version. So they released patched versions, like .1 versions of the at least the 19.1 and 19.2, and then also Next.js. You need to make sure you update to the right version that bundles in those fixed versions of React. So that's the first thing. Like, if you don't know if you're affected, just update to those versions and close the door. If you need to dig a little bit deeper, then you have to dive in to understand if you're using the server-side communication components of this. And that can be a little bit harder. You're going to have to talk to your engineers and things like that to understand the exact use cases. But the safest thing is just to update. And because these are relatively recent versions, and because they patched multiple different versions of it, you should hopefully be able to update fairly easily. That would be the hope, right?
We've seen some organizations try to use WAFs as a foolproof protection from this. Our recommendation is, while not a bad thing, that is at best a temporary measure. There are POCs out there in the wild that bypass WAF-based protection. So this really is about rapid response dependency management, getting your upgrades situated and in place. So we've got this really bad thing out there, a vulnerability. There's a pretty clear path to remediate it, which is upgrading and getting on these latest. I'd be curious then, based off of this, kind of to wrap us up here, what is kind of next steps here? Like, what's a good go forward strategy if you were caught unaware in this? What would be something, maybe if you were caught unaware and didn't like how you've had to respond over the weekend, maybe what would be some areas that you think people should look at as process improvements or ways to, quote, not waste a good crisis?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of, like, when we talk about intentionally malicious, there are ways to actually defend against your developers getting these things. When we're talking about bugs, there's always going to be bugs in software. These things will happen. I think the one maybe mitigating factor of this particular one, like I said, is it only affects seemingly relatively recent versions of React. So the depth, while it's wide, may not be as deep. If you remember back to Log4j, it affected, like, I think all the way back to the alpha versions of 2.0, if I remember that correctly. And so that was like tens of years of stuff that needed to be updated, and people on the older ones had a heck of a time updating, right? So that makes the problem remediation much harder. In this case, I think it should be more straightforward. That's the good news. But you need to accept that these things are going to happen and think through, how am I going to respond? If I don't even know what I'm using, how will I respond? You don't want your security operations center emailing your product managers and technical leads asking them if they're using this thing. That's horribly inefficient, especially when these things become known at inconvenient times, like holidays. And you're really in a race with the bad guys. I was reading an article just before this, actually. The Amazon team, the AWS team, with their honeypot systems, was observing China-based exploits of this attack within hours, like I think 2 hours of the vulnerability being disclosed. Chinese-based organizations were attacking, exploiting this worldwide, right? So you don't have a lot of time. You don't have time for those emails to sit in inboxes and be unresponsive. You need to know for sure what's going on. So you need to have tooling. Of course, this is what Sonatype does. We've been doing it for like 15 years now, to help you understand what's inside your software. And when something like this happens, you immediately get notified. Your teams get notified. Your builds are notified. Everybody knows where, in fact, these vulnerable components live in your infrastructure. So you effectively get to skip the triage step and to move immediately to responding. Right. And in some cases, people have deployed our capabilities to auto update. So they could have, by the time they realized what was going on, there might have been a pull request. All they had to do is hit the merge button and move on with life. So like I said before, this is a very solvable and solved problem for people. Yeah. It doesn't have to be hard. And there will be another one. It's guaranteed. Humans are fallible. Right now, humans still write a bunch of the software, despite all the talk about AI. And so this is going to keep happening, and you need to prepare yourself for when, not if.
That's right. And always in December, it seems, when one of the big ones hit.
In December, yeah.
So look, that's what we wanted to cover here, to give you a quick and brief update. We have a blog that covers a lot of this information, and a full resource center on Sonatype.com, as an organization that really prides itself in knowing the most and having the most deep intelligence of how the world uses open source. When something like this happens to the open source community, we want to be your trusted source for that information, knowledge, and where to go next. So for Brian and myself, thank you very much. And if you want to learn more, sonatype.com is a bunch of great information. So for David and myself, thank you all very much.